Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, today is our last class for FHS 408, Spirituality and Human Services.
That's sad.
We want to give some thank yous to people who participated in the class. And we want to especially thank Andy Kirkpatrick, who spends his time in the hallway managing the camera and does a tremendous job of editing, and we get to see the effects of both he and Wade Christensen's work when they post on YouTube, which has been so much fun the whole quarter. Yes? We also want to thank Professor Mark Uno. Mark was Keri and my spiritual leader in this process, helping us think through so many of the different issues that could arise in the course. So he provided, really inspiration for the design of the course, and he provided, of course, the two introductory lectures, which were quite thoughtful and provocative. We also want to thank the faculty of the University of Oregon Religious Studies Department and their chair, Professor Daniel Falk. And especially thank Professors Deborah Green and Rick Colby for their insightful lectures. Deborah Green creating a very interesting environment, responding to your questions and really teaching in a very interesting and didactic method. And then Rick Colby for introducing so many important ideas about Islam. So we're very appreciative of them. And of course to history professor Jack Maddox for his brilliant presentation on Christianity and the relationship between the Old Testament, the New Testament, etc. We also want to thank our guest community panelists, especially Reverend Eric Green, Reverend Greg Flint, and Dr. Richard Beswick. Also, Rabbi Yitzhak Henkin Husbands and Ibrahim Hamidi. They were all graciously generous with their time, and they had such a good time interacting with each of you and being part of this experimental course. And then, of course, we'd like to thank you all for, we refer to you as the 29 pioneers, who had the courage, the trust, the tenacity, some would say the temerity, to take the class and then to stay with it and to be actively involved. And then finally, I want to personally thank Keri for her leadership and her wisdom for coming up with this idea and having the inspiration, but also the risk-taking idea to come to the faculty, express her ideas, and then to put the work into really making this happen. And without Keri Bellotti, we would not be here today. And so I just wanted to be able to thank her personally and to thank, hopefully you would thank her too. So with that, we're going to have hopefully a class today that provides you with the opportunity for lots of interaction and discussion. We've organized it in an ambitious manner. We took the questions that you provided, and a total of 35 questions were provided to us. Keri went ahead and organized them into different content areas. And then together we organized them into different types of either lecture, discussion, small group activities, etc. So what I thought I would do to begin with is to remind us of the purpose of the course and then kind of do a little travel log through winter quarter 2008. And remember, the class purpose was to explore pluralism. And in pluralism, the idea of energetic engagement with religions or faith traditions that are different than our own. And again, as we discussed this idea, we argued for the energetic nature of it that would also have the potential outcome of increased relationship development with others of different faith traditions. And again, pluralism is the idea of seeking understanding across lines of religious difference. And the notion of pluralism is that we hold on to our own religious or faith traditions and differences, not in isolation, but in relationship to one another. And pluralism is an idea that is very consistent, I think, with the values of the Family and Human Services program, in that we are constantly seeking ways to better understand both ourselves, but also understand ourselves in the context of others, especially those who we interact with in a professional relationship. And that pluralism is really about interpersonal dialogue. So very consistent. And again, this idea that we don't simply argue with people about our differences, but we seek to value our own traditions, understand others' traditions, and in that process develop better understanding and closer relationships. So how did we engage this idea of pluralism? What was the way that we attempted to communicate this and to get some of the richness that needs to take place in this process? And so the course started with a vigorous presentation on the role of religion and spirituality from Dr. Mark Uno. And I felt his first lecture was a perfect way to set the stage and to alert us all to some of the depth and complexity and nuances that occur, in the study of religion, and especially this notion of spirituality. And Dr. Uno is really a world-class expert and a very engaging lecturer. And so, I just felt that he was the perfect person to kick our class off and to let us all know that, wow, there's a lot to this, and we have a lot to learn. And of course, his second lecture was interesting also because it provided the basis for understanding things about Buddhism and Shintoism and Taoism, but also how each of these traditions is very, very connected to the idea of service. And he used the example of psychotherapy. And so I thought that we got a good start to the course in that we had both content and theory and research and framings of issues, but also the very practical notion that guides this course, which is what does all this mean for our personal lives and our professional lives vis-a-vis other people in a human relations context. Our discussion of pluralism was quite lively, and I remember it very much because I'd only been home for a very short period of time, and I was reflecting very much on my experience in India and was still affected by the experience that I had interacting with people who consider their spirituality to be an integral part of their lives. And so as we discussed pluralism, it seemed like that this idea was resonating with each of you, in that the dialogue that we had was quite exciting and quite vital and energetic. And this idea of making sure that we don't just have our ideas about other people's religions and spiritual traditions based on misinformation or biases or misconceptions, but that we began to think about them in a personal, factual manner. And then hopefully each of you had the opportunity to access the Pluralism Project website through Harvard University and began looking at all of the opportunities and resources that exist in that particular website and that particular organization to assist you and to guide your further knowledge and learning in this particular area. And then we had a real treat. At least I felt it was a real treat, having President Riviere here and hearing for the second time, as remember, Keri and I saw President Riviere give this particular speech to the interfaith group at the beginning of fall quarter. And the idea of karma and dharma and how he saw this as really an organizing principle for life, and how the people of India, and especially the Hindu faith, and dharma and karma are so intertwined with these two very important ideas, purpose in life and action. And the fact that he was able to tell us stories from the sacred texts of the Hindu faith and do so in such a friendly, conversational manner. It really, for me, it made it sound like, wow, I could listen to this guy tell stories for a long, long, long time. Very, very helpful. And then, of course, the fact that at each stage you're able to read these basic texts and look at the material that we provided you in hopes that it gives you a little bit of extra information so that when you do leave this class, you'll have those resources available and you can remind yourselves of them in the future. Then we had a really eye-opening presentation by Professor Deborah Green. And I think Keri and I were both wondering how that was going to work out. And because we had really talked with each of our presenters about how we'd like to have the basic precepts presented and, kind of basic information so that the conversation that would occur would be, based on good information. And we really worked hard to find that reading material that you could review prior to class so that, that some of those basic principles of Judaism would be available to you. And then she presented her information in such a different way and in such an interactive way. And it just seemed like that was a really interesting way to present information and to actively engage each of you. And so we thank her again for that. And then to have Rabbi Yitzhak come here and share his personal story and the relationship that his faith has with his family, and especially the challenges that his father experienced with mental health challenges, was very, very powerful for me, and just how he constantly showed the interrelationship between faith and service, and basically was saying these are not separate entities, but that, part of who we are as people, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, matters not. We all have this basic idea of service and caring and being one with each other in a unified human community. I felt it was very powerful. Then we had a little bit of energy occurring this next week because we had planned to have Professor Falk give a lecture on on Christianity, and he had provided you with some very detailed information. His own, personally developed lecture materials on crucial biblical texts, both Old Testament and New Testament, and then he was unable to attend. And so at the very last minute, Professor Jack Maddox agreed to participate and give his lecture. And in his very warm, almost southern conversational way, to take Professor Falk's lecture and present it to us and keep the energy flowing on a regular basis. I was just very, very appreciative of that. And I learned something very important that day because I'd never considered that the two pillars of Christianity would be the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount. And I thought the way he framed that and really simplified it was very, very effective. And the way he engaged with each one of us in his lecture, I thought was great. And then the next week, to have three such interesting religious leaders from our community come together, responding to your questions, and it was almost, you know, as if we had three brothers together seeing a slightly different perspective on the family or on, you know, the world. Reverend Eric Green, of course, really being, you know, biblically informed. You know, that at each point a question's asked, you know, he would bring out the Word and point to the reference in the Bible and explain it from a very strong biblical tradition. And then Reverend Flint going, well, that's right, Eric, I think that's great, but, you know, we can look at this another way. And, you know, have you considered that it would possibly be a different interpretation of how that particular verse or note in the Bible could be presented? And then to have Richard Beswick go, I agree both with Eric and I agree with Greg, and here's maybe a way we can understand how to link these two pieces together. I thought it was brilliant, and I hope that each of you felt that you were seeing really a broad-based interpretation and showed the incredible diversity of Christianity in front of you for a 2.5-hour presentation. Then we had quite a detailed and informative lecture from Rick Colby on Islam. And I have to admit that that was the one area that I learned the most. The different pillars, you know, underpinning Islam and all those wonderful connections between Judaism and Christianity and Islam and all of the similar references in their sacred text to the sacred texts of the other traditions. I thought that was very interesting. And then how he placed Islam in the context of trade routes and history and culture. Very, very interesting. But then the next week, which was hard to believe it was just a week ago, to hear Ibrahim Hamidi talk about being a Muslim, about prayer, about the importance of this in the lives of people, and challenging us, as each of our lectures did, challenge us to not operate on the basis of stereotype, not operate on the basis of biases and misconceptions, to please learn about these traditions and look at how so many of them have consistent, positive, life-affirming, human characteristics, and not just look at the fringe elements of any religious tradition. And when he was showing us the elements of prayer, you know, I for that moment, you know, time stood still for me. I mean, it was for me, a very powerful image, because most of the time you see a still photograph of very large groups of people kneeling, you know, all in a line, head to the ground, and to see all of the steps that come up to that and the understanding of why they do each one of these things, I thought was extremely powerful. So where do we go from here? What have we learned, and what do we plan to do? And so now we're going to kind of move into this stage of you know, what have you been telling us that you wanted more of, less of, and just have a conversation with some of the thoughts that we're having about the future of this class. And I was going to ask Keri to just kind of talk about what her thoughts are in terms of how we would take the information that's come from the students, what we've learned from each of our different guest speakers and lecturers, and what do you think is going to happen? What's the next step?
Well, the first step is taking all the information that you guys have provided us in terms of evaluation and taking it very seriously. So I'm reading through all the midterm and final evaluations and even the assignments and picking out any of your feedback through those, what would be more helpful for this class in the future. And then it's just kind of going to the drawing board again and seeing what is worth keeping, what was effective, and how to incorporate new things into a quarter or 2-quarter sequence class.
What about more group discussions? What are your thoughts about that? And then we're opening it up, of course, to you all.
Well, I received that question that you guys see up there. Would they be more beneficial? And I got a lot of feedback that you guys liked them. And so we want to make sure that we utilize them, but not too much time is dedicated there, that we'd rather be doing large group discussions. So what are your thoughts on the amount of small group conversations we had, and at what point they seemed to become less relevant, you know, whether that was the time allotment per class or how often they occurred throughout the quarter?
What are your thoughts?
I personally thought it was great timing. I enjoyed the large group and thought there was enough time, small group, and then bring it back to large group. Personally, I wouldn't change anything, but I didn't write that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like there were classes where we had about 2 segments of small group and then we bring it back to large group, and that felt really good. There were some classes where we only had 1, and that was a lot of information to absorb with not a lot of time to talk about it. So I'd say 2 or 3 times for small group discussion, and a 3-hour class felt really good to me.
Kind of like in segments, you give like a lecture presentation, and then you have like 1 hour in a group, another segment like that. As she said, sometimes when it's too long, it's like too much information to absorb. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what we're trying to get a sense of. You know, maybe 40 minutes of lecture, kind of catch your breath, and then maybe 15, 20 minutes of discussion. You know, 40 minutes of lecture, catch your breath, 15 minutes. So something like that, so that, because I know I have a attention span problem. You know, that if I'm listening, you know, maybe 50, 55, you know, getting into an hour, I'm starting to maybe drift a little. So 2 to 3 segments, 2 for maybe 50 minutes apiece, or maybe 3 for 40, and then breaks afternoons. Sam?
I think adding to that too, having different sections be more specific for the topic. So, you know, the first half of the class, or the first segment, you're talking about the actual faith itself, you know, the history, the basic elements, whoever is sharing their personal perspective on it, you know, whoever, depending on who's sharing. And then having, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes for us as a group to be able to just talk about what we've just learned. And not how it relates to human services, just our own perspectives, how we feel about it, or what we learned. And then go into the next segment specifically about human services, how this fits itself, what we should be learning to apply as human service workers, and then having another 15, 20-minute segment about what we've learned in that first piece and the second piece, and bringing that together.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Andy? Oh.
I think case examples would have been really beneficial for me, to kind of have a story, both positive and the negative, that kind of comes out of someone who is learned and experienced, and then there, you know, the other flip side of that, and how both the case example for how that influenced or helped or hurt the client, and then how that experience was for the professional as well. I think kind of hearing firsthand would have been really helpful.
So were you thinking the case examples at both levels, or would that simply be that the first piece of it being more technical, historical, informational, and then maybe the second section would have a that would possibly lead to the discussion on human services?
More based off of the discussion on human services and how my experience and knowledge about certain religions is going to help and hurt, or just certain professionals' experiences and how that has helped or hurt their ability to reach their client.
I would like to see more case examples and then see how the group would handle that case and apply our knowledge from FHS and how to handle that client who has a spiritual background and how to kind of the last speakers.
Excellent. Very good. Anything else? Well, the next question that you raised, would this class benefit from including videos to show various religious practices around the world? And I'm seeing a lot of head nods on that one. Could you head nod for the camera? Well, you know, the thing that's beautiful about that is that those things do exist on the internet. I mean, one of the things that we didn't, you know, we really put a heavy focus on utilizing our local resources. And you'll notice very little internet material here. Pluralism, yes. But that would make it quite a bit easier, wouldn't you think?
Perhaps, yeah.
Oh, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some hands up.
I honestly, personally don't like the idea.
Okay.
I like what you were saying with the internet, maybe even using those as an extra credit assignment, just have like a list or something like that, but I would rather have, I mean, I can watch any video at any time. You know, I'd rather have this class be, you know, the uniqueness that it is, so.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't really enjoy that as much.
Okay. Well, let's hear from Tara, and I want to make sure I get you. Yeah.
I was just gonna agree with Erin because I almost felt like special that I got the chance to hear so many of the amazing speakers that I probably might not have ever heard their thoughts on some of these religions and topics. So I would say, I guess, minimalize the videos because I could have, some of them I could have listened to for another hour because it was so interesting to ask questions and hear their responses. So.
Oh, I was just going to say it'd be a great assignment, but not necessarily in class. Like, everyone can look it up online, you know, especially with it.
Okay.
Well, I would love to have some visual stimuli, but I think that if we had more group discussions and more breaks, then I wouldn't need it.
Okay.
I think it's more of if we had a visual stimuli, it would just be giving us a break from hearing or getting all that information.
Okay. Alden?
I agree that the emphasis should be on the speakers, and I think we've all really enjoyed the opportunity to have that sort of a more intimate interaction. But I do want to reflect on the last class and just seeing a 5-minute video and how just stirred up we were and like rejuvenated, and there was a lot of discussion around it, and I wrote about that in my paper. And then I tried to find it online actually, and I couldn't find it. So I mean, you know, we can find those resources technically, but I think you and the speakers probably have a much better idea of some really good resources to see. So maybe having that to see ahead of time, or even just like a 5-minute clip during class to kind of refresh things, because I thought that was really, really powerful.
Okay.
Yeah, I both of your ideas are really great. One of the things is there's something powerful about visual. If you see something, it sticks and stays in your mind. Sometimes when we say let's go home, and maybe we don't get time to review the video and see, if it's only like, let's say 5 minutes or 4 minutes, and then there's a case, for example, about people who are rejected in the community because of religion, and then you throw that for discussion. As a human services worker, based on what you saw, some people are very moving. What will you do?
Okay.
And so it's not like every class, but you can kind of have a little bit mixture.
Well, what were,
Sorry, with the mouthful. Kind of going off of that, I think just to maybe compromise, a really easy kind of quick fix about it is throwing up, you know, your last slide, you know, resources. what can you see, things, you know, I tried to tell you guys about those 2 films that I've seen that were really applicable to the, you know, the class that we were having in that day. Something like that, or even a link on Blackboard that we can all kind of share to say, you know, maybe you guys forgot, or some of you had walked out before I said that, or, you know, kind of thing, and we're all moving, we all have really busy lives, so just, hey, look, I saw this video today, check it out. It has a lot to do with the class subject, or even just your guys' you know, our speakers' opinions, some things they've seen, so just like a list of videos we can find. Because I know I'm really busy and it's harder, you know, we do go look for things, but it's, if I already know the video clip, name the author, then I'll be much more inclined to go find it.
Okay.
Just to kind of bring the first and second questions together, I think it'd be awesome to maybe incorporate some discussions on Blackboard, a place where we can have some threads going, so maybe we ask a question and then have that sort of small group, more intimate processing and debriefing experience on Blackboard. So get a little bit more of that going on since we're only meeting once a week.
Let's move on to this last piece. Can this class include presenters on Catholicism, Mormonism, atheism, indigenous spirit traditions? I mean, yeah. Part of the challenge that we had was we said early on, this is not a comprehensive list of all religions. And we said that because we didn't think we could fit everything in. And but how much do we lose by not having a more comprehensive look at the different traditions?
In my opinion, I think that we focus our class too much in international concept.
Okay.
Finding human services abroad in a way. And I'm not saying that they're not important. I think you guys did a great job, and Keri, thank you so much for putting this class together. But I would like to see kind of some of those integrated and focus more on the predominant ones in the U.S. Because I mean, for me, that's kind of like I was interested kind of to see how I was going to deal with someone like for example in the U.S. I think we can include some of them as well, because I mean I know there's a lot of people with with the Christianity, but with different traditions or beliefs or stuff like that we didn't really cover.
Okay. Great.
I think that it would have been really great to hear maybe like a Native American come in and talk about their cultural beliefs, because I know that it's a huge population and something I honestly know nothing about. So I think it would be really interesting to hear their spiritual perspective.
I had an opportunity to meet with a professor in the educational teacher ed program who has just joined the faculty and was talking about the class, and he says, "Oh well, I would love to come and present on indigenous movements and things like that." So yeah, I mean trying to keep it all in balance. I think that's going to be a challenge for us, but I do agree with you.
I would love to see a little more engagement with what role religion can play in our personal lives as human service professionals. Dan, you touched a little bit on that, and it was actually really helpful to hear your experience. And I would have loved more opportunity for me to have been pushed to engage what role it can play in this work for me.
Okay.
Maybe you have like different type of presenters. There's some who are more knowledgeable and who were lecturing very, very bright people. And some of them also who sort of were like speakers, just speaking like the Christian part of different pastors. They didn't show slide, but they have engagement or sharing the idea. If you were to incorporate some of like Native or Catholic and just sitting there for questions for why you don't have any faith, like atheism, why you don't believe and so forth, that may be good, because if you try to invite one by one, maybe you may not have time to have all of them.
That was part of our problem. Is that this would be a great class for a semester system. Or, in fact, Keri and I have discussed the possibility of a 2-course sequence you know, that it would be maybe two quarters, you know, consecutively. But anyway, so.
That's what I was going to suggest, actually, 2 terms.
Okay, great.
Well, I was going to say that I really think that it would be helpful to have like Mormonism, Catholicism, and atheism, especially, I mean, all of them, but, and I know that there's only a limited amount of time, but like people that I have come into contact with, like in the field or like working or volunteering or whatever, just because of like how he was saying, like in the United States, like, you know, like especially like Mormonism is kind of a hot button topic, and same with like, and also I always meet people that are like very spiritual but don't identify with a specific religion, and I think that maybe having someone come in and like talk about that and like what it plays in their lives, even if they don't identify with the specific religion, I think it would be really interesting. And because we do, or what I've experienced living in the United States and working here, is that, like, the Christianity aspect of it was like really like grabbing to me, because I experienced it firsthand a lot more than like Buddhism and other, you know, religions. But that just could be narrow.
That's helpful.
I wanted to add too that, you know, we talked about how, kind of going off of what you just said, that one of the fastest growing religions is that people don't have a religion at all, and which I guess that wouldn't really be a religion, but for someone that comes from, you know, basis of faith, it's easy for me to identify with people of different faiths because I kind of understand the role that it plays. I have a harder time imagining working with someone who that's not really important to them. And so, and I realize, you know, this is spirituality and human services, but I think for the sake of human service workers, that's the absence of a religion or of a spirituality, not necessarily atheism, but maybe including atheism, would be really, really helpful, because I think just as much as we acknowledge it, we also have to acknowledge that other people don't necessarily.
Okay, thank you. Erin?
I think a way to include atheism would be just to talk about it more when you talk about pluralism, like incorporate it more into the pluralism lecture, because it would be, I mean, it'd be pretty difficult to bring someone who is an atheist into a religions and human services class. I feel like it could get not argumentative, but kind of like way too much. But so I think that a way to mend that would be just talking about it more when we talk about pluralism.
Okay, thank you. So, of course, this course started as a senior project, and
no, it started before the senior project.
well, yeah, that gets it's a chicken and egg, you know. I mean, idea came, and then
yes.
Yeah. But it's an outgrowth of Keri Bellotti's senior project. Is that an accurate statement? Good. Okay. So one of the questions that you came up with was, how about compiling a list of churches in Lane County and what services they provide to the community, days, times, services, accessibility, as a potential senior project?
That was actually my question, because I'm doing that for a senior project.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, it's not necessarily like in the spiritual community, but I'm putting together like a really, really easy, accessible like calendar that says on this Friday at this day between 3 and 6, this church is giving out lasagna for free. You know, it's like I'm putting together something like that people who come into DHS offices or wherever I stick these things, they can take them. And so when we were talking about compiling a list of churches, I was hoping that, because like that's something I really want to incorporate after taking this class. Like there's no reason that I wouldn't want to incorporate church services into this project. And so that's like kind of what I was going with. And yeah, I don't really know how to address that.
Well, I think it could be an ongoing, you know, some senior projects get started and then they just keep going as people continue to do the updating and as new services are provided. But I know from my perspective as a human service professional, I don't know all of the different services that are provided, and I'd like to know more about that. And I think from a community perspective, tying into something like direction services and really have that component to an existing handbook or a website would be helpful. So that was your idea.
Yeah, kind of cheating off of everyone else and trying to see if they can help me out here.
If you allow me for a question for Keri, when we started this class, you were born in India, and she never had opportunity to tell us what motivated her to come up with this idea.
So that's your question?
Yes.
Well, how much do you want me to do? Okay. In April of last year, so wow, a year ago, we were in a class in the FHS program, FHS 493, a professional ethics class, and we had a question in a group discussion that asked what the opinion was about the FHS program curriculum in regards to faith awareness. And so in my discussion group, there was a lot of energy around this question, and I took notes and made mental notes, and then I went to the discussion leaders of all of those groups and asked them, and so I just documented all of these opinions and thoughts regarding its existence or lack thereof in our curriculum, spirituality, awareness, religion, and I took it to Dan because I had all this information and I knew it probably needed to get to the faculty. So I took it to Dan, and the rest is kind of history in that we saw that something needed to be done. You know, we didn't know immediately whether it was going to be a course or not, but that this was a topic that had a lot of energy around it. So just as a student, I was a student representative as well, so I had kind of a extra amount of care towards the student body and what the needs were. So.
And from a historic context, this particular issue has been a hot button item in the FHS program for many, many years. You often would see some discussions emerge within either the family systems class or the policy class, or it would come up, and sometimes it would cause a rupture between students in our program, and so there was lots of tension around dancing around it. And so I think from the faculty's perspective, it was, why dance around it? Why not address it head on? From a perspective that could have a healing or hopeful dimension to it, versus constantly worrying that in the context of a family class or a policy class that we would have these ruptures occur where people on both sides of an issue felt very hurt and very alienated from each other. And so while there was great trepidation and nobody on the faculty raised their hand to say, oh, I want to teach that, except for me, so we decided to pursue it. I mean, we really did not believe that a course would emerge this quickly. And so yes, it was one of those things where I think the timing was right, the desire, part of the faculty to address an important issue, and Keri's leadership in terms of providing us data, because we really had never had a comprehensive data set on what are the thoughts, what are the perspectives, and would anybody take the class? And the 29 pioneers have proven that you will. And so we're anxiously awaiting the result of how you all really feel about the class and whether
Thank you for being open to the idea. That's great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I put this original PowerPoint together, and now I look at it, and it doesn't look exactly the way I had put it together. It's much better. It's much more professional looking. When I first learned about PowerPoint about 10 years ago, my teacher was Professor Kevin Altucker. And he always complained that my PowerPoints were so dull and boring. And I kept saying, well, it's because I'm so audio and visual myself that I don't need a flourish of PowerPoint. And he says, no, you need it. So we wanted to spend about 5 to 10 minutes per question, and we'll read whether or not there is sufficient energy and we'll decide to either move on or stay with each topic as it comes. But one of the great tensions that occurred even early on was this notion of the line between religion and culture. And everybody in academia feels very comfortable talking about multicultural perspectives, cultural competence. These are safe topics. And so the moment you add religion as a component of culture, then it changes it from being kind of a nice secular, safe in a way topic to one that has the potential for emotion, controversy, etc. So we wanted to talk about there, but where is that line? Where does the line exist? Is there a bright line, or is it a muted line? I almost like to view it as a fog line. If any of you have ever experienced fog, you know that it changes. Being a native of San Francisco, we always talk about fog. Where's the fog today? How far has it come in? But it's a when you see the fog, you know it's there, but when it leaves, you also experience it. So what is this line? And then how does it affect human services?
Okay, I'll take a shot at it.
Renee?
Okay, so the place where my head goes immediately is that culture is something that we all inevitably are a part of, right? That we're born into a culture, and you can't get away from that. Like, you're born into your society. You don't choose what culture you're born into. You're just born into it, and no matter how many times you move around, you're going to affiliate with some sort of culture. I went to India and I affiliated with that kind of culture really quickly, no matter what. Culture is something that's inevitable. I don't think religion is. I think some people are born into religion and others aren't. I don't know how that necessarily differentiates. I think we need to kind of group those two when dealing with human services. This is my personal opinion, because they both have an immense amount of influence on how someone chooses to live their life. But I think there is a pretty defined foggy line between what religion and culture is in someone's life.
Okay, good courageous stab at it. Thank you.
And on that, I think that also religion is a little bit more personal relationship with with your beliefs. It's a personal belief. It's we all born into culture is different. You're born into it. You were assimilated into whatever environment you're born, traditions, ethnicity, background, whatever. But I think that religion becomes a little more personal to that person, to specific. Like, it's a more deep kind of way that, to me, religion is more your own belief and your own self kind of thing. But culture is a little more broad term that you share with a lot of people, but religion is a little different.
Okay. Does that notion of the personal component of religion resonate with people? Culture being something you're more maybe possibly generic, you're born into it. There's a lot of different trappings that don't require a personal commitment to, so to speak. Whereas religion, because of its practice of worship and prayer and study and that what we heard from many of our speakers is that there's this personal experience that happens in a spiritual life, in a religious life. It's not just it's not just literal and objective. It's subjective and experienced Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's a more of a personal commitment to yourself and to practice that religion that you feel comfortable with. But in culture, you don't really practice your culture because you're already in it. Like you don't realize that you are part of that culture until you go abroad and you see yourself as, oh, okay, I guess that's not what you see.
Okay.
It's more personal commitment and religion kind of thing.
Well, you were first. I have to respect that. Go ahead.
I'm not sure how to explain this, but I think that religion also affects like maybe the greater picture of culture, because like the things we wear, the things we eat, like I mean those are kind of affected by religion. Like Western society is completely different from Eastern society depending on the religion, if that makes sense. So on a greater picture, I think it integrates into people's lives.
Yeah, I was feeling kind of what you just said, that there's some cultures where religion is embedded in that culture. People are born with it, and they are doing religious practices because it becomes part of their lives. I mean, a baby does before. Like I'm a Christian, I have my baby. Before dinner we pray, and my baby now is over a year now and also try to say Amen. So so that's what I'm thinking that
But that was personal, correct? Very personal.
I think in talking about these distinctions, we really need to make the distinction between religion and spirituality as well. Because I think religion often talks about like the rituals and the practices, which I think of more as the cultural aspect. And then like, as you were saying with like the personal commitment, I would kind of identify that more as spirituality and maybe not so much the cultural influences.
I'm thinking really hard about this one, and I still don't even know. This is a really great question. I think it's very individual. I think for some people, there's different levels of awareness, both about their culture and their religion. There's different levels of commitment and practice and devotion and wavering in and out of it. There's different levels of how involved your community is or how isolated you are within the religion or the culture. So I think it's really individual, and I think it's interesting that the two first comments were that religion's kind of more of a choice and culture is this thing that, like the air we breathe, let's say. And my first response was almost the opposite, that depending on your environment, it could be religion is that air you breathe, you know, your father's saying amen, and at one, your first word is amen, or however it is. So it's very individual. It's very individual.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, I'm going to focus on kind of on the second part of the question, because I don't think we really touched on that. I think with both religion and culture, and how it affects our role as human service workers, I think it's pretty similar to how we've been taught to look at culture and kind of like assessing the whole concept of the ecological model, like that's been embedded into us at this point. And so just kind of now we've been able to look at, because of this class, we've been able to look at religion and the factors that it plays into people's lives. And instead of looking at it with the biases that like society gives us, we are able to now kind of address religion as almost similar to what a culture is, even though there is that gray area. It gives us the opportunity to look at the individual for what they are.
I have a friendly follow-up to that. How does spirituality, let's say, fit into the ecological model? What level of the ecological model does spirituality, is it the mesosystem, the microsystem, the exosystem? Where does it fit? Who's got an idea about that?
I think spirituality is the individual, and I think that maybe when you go to religion, it branches out to, I mean, probably every level.
Okay. So it isn't.
In one way or another, you know, whether it's the government to, you know, to the people around us, you know, the MISA, the macro.
Okay, very interesting. I would love to see kind of a revised ecological model based on this class, and how we would think about that and how we would frame it and describe it, and possibly utilize it in a genogram or something like that. That'd be
I think along with that is really similar to what you were actually just touching on. It's really individual basis. I know for me it would most definitely, no doubt, be my micro and meso system as well. So I think it's just where, you know, who you are, where you were raised, and the family you were brought up in. I think it's very similar. It's all on an individual basis.
Tying it back into culture too, if you grow up where your spirituality is a huge part of your culture, it's definitely a part of every level of system. It's part of your microsystem, it's your exosystem. For example, if you, you know, I have a friend who goes to Temple Beth Israel, and her whole world is centered around access to resources through that synagogue, but then also through other churches and things like that. So, and I think culture, your ecological, you know, systems, those all depend too on the culture that you come from. You know, what's the social blueprint, if you will, you know, the macro system. What's the social blueprint for certain things that you have? So I think it obviously depends between spirituality and religion, but I mean, depending on where you are on that spectrum too, it's either a huge part of your ecological, you know, perspective, or it's not. But
Thank you. Well, that was a nice 10-minute-er, wasn't it? It started slow. I was a little nervous about it. But now let's move it to the kind of the policy level. I mean, remember, Family Human Services is a major policy type department. In regards to the separation between church and state, the policy, are there certain lines and topics that we should adhere to in all cases? Or is it ultimately helping the person of greater importance than this perceived separation? Separation of church and state.
I'm having trouble. Like, what would an example be?
Separation of church and state. We don't have prayer in school, in public schools. You know,
I know, but like on a more like in a human service, if you're helping someone, besides I could think like same-sex marriages, I can't think of when this would come into play. I'm just so I can help think of something. Yeah.
Can I, for example, like as a high school guidance counselor, even if you know the student that you're advising and they say, hey, can you pray for me? You wouldn't be able to do that because you're on a public school campus. So like if you were their youth pastor, for example, you could at the church, but if you were in that building, you wouldn't be able to. Because it's a public, because there's the position of power and you're in a public setting. Even if they identify with that way.
Because remember, the whole idea of the separation of church and state was created by the early framers of our Constitution in reaction to state churches in Europe, where the church and the state were the same. And what the framers of the Constitution said, let's not do that. Let's separate this. We'll give freedom of religion. And so the construct of the freedom of religion for each individual is enshrined, and we're not going to allow the church to dominate our public institutions. And that's why the fault line oftentimes is around schooling, because schooling is one of the primary functions of the secular government. And that's why the prayer in the school is the class example. The one that Sam has provided is another example. But then faith-based services then became a flashpoint, because the idea was that now we will have government money going to religious organizations, which will then require them to adhere to all of the protections that exist in our secular world. So that's why the flashpoint is quite distinct.
I was just gonna make sure I clarify. So in a sense, when it comes to the schools, it's something that was meant to be more freedom actually kind of became more restrictive, in a sense that like you can't pray on campus, rather than not being forced to pray. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think the way the Constitution works is that schools have to give religious groups access to their buildings, but that their faculties are not engaging in religious activity. So it in a way you're correct that it's a protective mechanism against undue intrusion, and now the interpretation of it is again, whenever you get a legal definition, then it's sharply defined. And that's where I think what you have just stated is a possible interpretation on some people, in some people's minds.
I think I said the other side now.
I just, the certain line for me is if there's one religion that starts to dominate all others. I think the classic example is Christianity. You know, as long as those faith-based organizations that are being given government money aren't being turned down because of whatever faith they are, or yeah, I mean, as long as they are all getting equal access to those resources, equal access to those public institutions and places for their organization, to me, that's the only line, is that there's no one group or no group of groups that are dominating others or excluding others from being able to serve the community.
And so, again, the fault line has to do with the protections for people with disabilities, elderly, gender, sexual orientation, so that the organization has to agree with all of the laws of the federal government to become eligible to access tax dollars. And so that's where the debate comes down is that what if a certain let's just use the example of an organization that says, well, we're open to hiring anybody for our organizations, but we have this one rule over here that we really think is important, and it's consistent with our philosophy, and that happens to be in opposition to federal protections. By definition, then, that organization cannot access government money unless they change their policy and practice, or else they are subject to lawsuits through the equal opportunity situation. So it's not just, I'm going to open everything up to everybody. You have to have the law, the mission statement, and the policies that are consistent with what the federal government mandates. And that's where you have the fault line.
Going back to the separation of church and state, something that I find ironic is that the government says no mixture of church and state, but simply the president swears before the nation and the people, they put their hand on the Bible. And then you have also in some of the law and constitution, there's something that is something that it's taken out of the Bible, and you can even see how that is. On the other hand, what I think I sort of agree with her is that religion can be a powerful weapon to oppress the minority people. In the name of a religion, even the good name of, let's say, for example, Christianity, many people have given it a bad name for misusing it and using it as a weapon to oppress other people. So I think, personally, I think that it's good to enforce that we have to have church business separate from what the government and so forth do. That's my personal thinking.
Did I see a hand over here? A hand over here.
I just agree with him. I think it's wanted to prevent what already happened in history, and the thing is that just because some few pick up the name of religion and commit atrocities to humanity in the name of God or in the name of whoever. So I think just to prevent that, I think it's it's good to have two different identities. Politics of in this country are very extreme, and it can be very polarizing. So, and I feel like sometimes they just pick and choose. With they pick and choose whatever they can fit in the laws, and they say, yeah, we're freedom of religion, but at the same time we're not letting you do this. It's kind of like politics are very very like that, and I think, in my personal opinion, I think it's good that we have that separation, because not everybody is has the same religious background or even spiritual at all or anything like that. So I think in order for history not to repeat itself, it's good to do that.
Any other thoughts? Let's go into just kind of a subtle little topic here. Many parents are separated from their children during a DHS child welfare investigation. Most families get 1 to 2 hours a week of supervised visitation. If a family is religious, should Department of Human Services Child Welfare allow children and families to attend worship services together in addition to DHS supervised visits? Who knows the policy on this?
From my experience, we've said no, and that's why I feel like if religion is a strength, why shouldn't children be allowed to go to worship service with their parents?
Well, I think it also depends on, like how much the parents have been trying to do the services that the court has required of them, and if the parents are doing everything they should be doing, and maybe it's like depends on the situation. Like, oh, these parents are doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they get the benefit of this, as opposed to.
Imagine if part of the ecological assessment identifies that as one of the strengths of the family, then it would seem to me, go ahead, Tara.
Well, I just feel like you kind of have to put it with anything else, like families who aren't religious, but maybe there's some special activity they usually do together every week. So it's, everyone gets there, everyone is equal, they get their visits in as if they're completing their services, if that is a strength, and yes, they get to go to their religious event, or yes, this family gets to go to their event, but I don't think just religion should be separate from any other activity families might do together that's positive.
I think one of the DHS missions is to make families self-dependent and kind of unite families instead of separate them. If religion is actually one of the strengths of the family, they're allowed, as long as the kid is safe and the kid is fine, I don't see why they shouldn't allow it. The supervisions, as long as the parents are doing whatever they have to do to get the kid back and make sure that the kid is safe, the families are allowed to worship or take the kid to church. I don't think it's not allowed.
I would agree with Tara, however, that it shouldn't be, in my opinion, an additional time. It could be their 2 hours a week is that they go to church. But like she said, maybe families have an event they do weekly. But they wouldn't get that extra time like a person would if they were going to church.
Who gets to make the decision whether or not it's a family strength or not? Who gets to make that decision? Who is that, the caseworker? The multidisciplinary team?
I immediately think of this really kind of nasty situation where I've had a lot of experiences with very manipulative parents, and that kind of, oh look, I think we might start going to church, so we get this additional time. Kind of, do you see where I'm going with that? I mean, once again, I think it would have to be on the caseworker's responsibility to say, hey, look, what is your history with your religion? How intense and important is it to you? I immediately go also to a young Muslim, child being, in a devout Muslim family and being taken away from that family, and how much that can be a risk factor in and of itself. Not having your father, the rest of your family, or the group that you usually pray with, to be reading these prayers to you, because it is such a group prayer in that religion, and not always, but a lot of times it is. For a young child to be taken away from that prayer might be really harmful.
I will take the responsibility of finding out what the policy is, and if it doesn't conform to what we have discussed here, then we'll have this as a basis of a discussion in a subsequent class. But I thought this was an excellent question because I did not know the policy.
I'm not exactly sure where I stand on it, because I kind of agree with what Shelby and Tara were saying, but at the same time, like I like what Pedro was saying about the mission of DHS. Like, is it to punish the families, or is it to to bring them together? And if this is seen as a as a good quality time, like it could be a real positive step for them. I would think. I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not saying I care which religion it is. I'm just saying if this is a positive step, is it to bring them closer together, or is it to punish the family and the child and the parents? It's kind of the mission statement of DHS. Which one is it?
I don't know. I really don't know, and that's why I like the question so much. I thought maybe the person who proposed the question had some unique information. I didn't see a hand go up from anyone with that unique information. So I will take the task of finding out the policy. What are some ways a person's spiritual/religious background influences their role as a service provider for clients? What might be some potential benefits or downfalls to strongly identifying with a particular spirituality as a service provider? Pedro's very active today.
And I just hope that I'm not taking any time from this. But if someone wants to just jump in, go ahead. Well, to me, I think that one of the things is that the person is self-aware of where's the line of being a human services provider and being yourself. Like, I believe that everybody is entitled to to be themselves and act ethically. I mean, when interacting with clients, code of ethics, just follow that. And doesn't matter if you're very strong, like a strong religious person, but follow like your integrity, your in that ethics that will pull you back when when you're going to probably pass the line where you're like, okay, where's my role as human services and where's my role as a religious person? I think to me that's the only thing that I would say is that self-aware.
Self-awareness and then following the code of ethics.
So I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but we had a lecture talking about the importance of individualizing case plans, and ever since then, looking through cases of my caseworker, I mean, so many case plans look identical, and so and it has really been bothering me. But like when talking about this religion thing, as a human service professional, if one of my clients is religious, I am absolutely going to use that as a strength for you, and I'm definitely going to try to go, search for services that can help you because, that's a strength for you. But I think where my weakness would be is since I don't identify with a religion, because when Sam was saying when she, a school guidance counselor and a kid was like, can you just pray for me? Like if someone said that to me, I wouldn't know how. Not that I wouldn't, not that I'd just be like, no, I'm really not comfortable, but I feel like I'd screw it up. And so I think that's my weakness. It's like, I really want to help you, but can you give me an outline here? Because I wouldn't know how.
Okay, very, very thoughtful. Aaron.
I have a question that goes along with that. It just kind of popped in my head. But if you're being ethical as a human service provider, someone comes to you with a religion that, let's say you're just not comfortable working with, you have very strong, you recognize you're strong, that, wow, I'm not going to be able to put that aside, I don't think I can work with you, let me refer you to someone else. Is that like discrimination? Would that when do you cross the line? Like, I know, like, I think it'd be best for the client, but how wouldn't they feel so, like, I feel like that would be.
I don't think you'd look at them and be like, I'm referring you to someone
Well,
else.
I know that, but I get that, but I mean.
Well, what do people think about what Aaron said? Yeah.
I think it depends how you come to that realization.
Yeah.
Like, if you come to it and, like, with negative feelings about that, I think that becomes discrimination. But if you come to that from a positive place and go, I won't be able to give you what you deserve as a client because I guess my, values of this are too strong, then that, I mean, you're doing your job because you're passing that client along to someone who will be able to serve them to the best of their potential. But I think it just all depends on how you look at it. I mean, because we're all entitled to our own opinions, and what we agree and disagree with, what makes a difference is if our disagreements turn into actions and turn into negative actions.
Well, I think that it's also very important to say that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to know yourself and what makes you uncomfortable, what you cannot and you can do. I mean, I think as when we are in the field as a professional, that's actually part of our professional growth, is to know ourselves and to know how can we help and how can we not help. Because if you don't say it, I mean, because you don't want to feel like you're discriminating, which that's totally different, But I think you will learn so much about yourself when you actually put yourself in that situation and you reflect upon your emotions and why you're uncomfortable. But but it's okay, because sometimes if you don't say it, you can hurt the person more than what you can actually help that person. So it's good to step back and say, hey, I would love to help, but I feel I can't do it this time, or maybe it's not not what I can do for you, but I know someone else. And that's what a lot of agencies refer people to different stuff, because they provide better resources than what you can do. So it's, yeah.
Do you don't want to work with the person because of his religion, or do you have another issues?
Me personally, I
mean,
I don't
know. About your
hypothetically, question. I don't know. I mean, it just kind of popped into my head. I was just kind of throwing it out there.
First of all, what I think, this is what I think about that case, right? First of all, we know that we are passionate to get in the field to help any human being in general, right? And then when we go into religion, and someone is practicing the religion, even if it's not your religion, I find it hard for you to say, because you are, for example, Hindu, a Buddhist, or a Muslim, I'm feeling uncomfortable to work with you. Do they try to convert you to their faith, or they just peacefully practicing their religion? If they don't push it on you, they don't do anything, they are just doing that. If I was your boss, I would have hard time hiring you.
Yeah. But she's not talking about that. She's talking about the fact that, if she doesn't feel competent, or she doesn't have and we talk about all the time about cultural competency, and I include religion in this. If you're not competent enough to offer those services to that person, it's okay to say I can do it. But if you put it in that sense, I would agree with you. I would totally say, I mean, this if everything that you're saying is based because I'm this and that, that's not okay. But I think what she said, if a client comes to me with a very strong, religious background, and I know that I can't help because I'm not that religious, but I know someone that might help that person, I would refer that person to that. That's what she's saying.
Yeah, the way I understand that. The way I was looking at this is that it's not like the person who's religious came to you as if you were a spiritual expert, wanting in a spiritual help. No, they want service from you. It's separate from spiritual needs. Does that make sense? If they come for spiritual need, then you say, I have no background on that. These people are wanting service from you. Those are two different.
I can imagine a circumstance, though, someone coming into my office and saying, what would Jesus do? I seriously, I mean, everyone comes from a different background, and there's not anything wrong with that. but I don't know what I would say. You know, and I completely agree with you. They want service, but maybe they want service in a really religious kind of way.
Yeah.
And maybe they just assume because, for whatever reason, they just walked into my office and they would say something like that. That would scare me because I know that I wouldn't be able to help them in the way that they were looking for that. I'll give them resources.
We've got 5 hands up. This is really exciting. So I want to give Sam and then Aaron and then back in the corner. And then I think there was another hand, maybe even, yeah, Jeremiah was up. Okay.
I wanted to answer Aaron's question, and then also the second question for that piece is for any of you that have prevention of youth violence Tuesdays and Thursdays, or you used to, I guess, at this point. We just talked about, there's a man that came in who used to be a delinquent youth, if you will, who was incarcerated or adjudicated, and then now is on the other side of the human services piece of that. And I asked him a question about, you know, when a person comes from a life view of not being adjudicated, not having to deal with really, really tough family issues, how do you, as the adjudicated youth, how do you see that person who really has no idea what your life circumstance is like? And then as the person who has no idea, you know, what are your suggestions for them? And what he said is, the biggest thing is to remain humble and to ask questions and to always just be open to the fact that you don't know everything. And you know, if that person is coming to you with that really specific life view, we all have a really specific worldview on something. It doesn't always have to be religion or spirituality. Just being able to, you know, Aaron, to say, you know, why don't you tell me about this? You know, turning that question back into another question. Well, because that's the whole purpose too with human services, is we don't want to just spoon feed the answers and the services and the resources and life change to our clients. We want them to discover it, because that's how they engage with it and that's how they really change. So just being able to remain humble, you know, and say, wow, you know, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Why am I uncomfortable? And let me ask a ton of questions to maybe help you discover more about yourself too.
Aaron and then Maddie.
For Aaron's question, I was thinking maybe making it a little more broader.
She gets the.
Well, I didn't mean it like.
She gets the top award for the best question.
No, I feel like it kind of makes me look like.
No.
No, it's fine. It's a good question because it can happen, and that's fine.
No, it's a good question.
Well, the way I'm going to approach the question is pretty much just kind of like what Sam was saying about being humble, knowing what situations that you're comfortable with dealing with and what situations you're not. You know, they're not trying to compare religion to anything else, but there's a lot of like just different people, you know, whether their criminal history that people may not want to deal with, also, you know, may not feel comfortable working with because they know their own buttons. And no matter what field you're in human services, whether you're a preschool teacher or you're or you're working for DHS, you need to know which buttons, because overall your job is to take care of whoever your client or family is. And it's not really about self-growth at that point, I don't think. I think it's more about helping whoever your client is.
Well, mine's just not a hypothetical situation, but like when we were talking about, you know,
I was just trying to think of a somewhat realistic situation where this could apply, and I was thinking, you know, what if I was a counselor and I was counseling a woman who was considering getting an abortion? And depending on my religious beliefs, I was 100% against that, felt like it's the wrong thing. Obviously, that's not something I'm going to say to my client, but I feel really uncomfortable, you know, helping her work through maybe choosing the option of getting an abortion. In that situation, I mean, for me personally, I would feel like I might need to remove myself from that situation. And I feel like it doesn't have to be bad, it doesn't have to be negative, but, you know, sometimes your values might conflict with those of your clients. And I think it's okay to, you know, pass it on to other people who can work with them better.
There was one hand over here, but now you get the final word, then we're going to take a break.
I just wanted to add to that. I think we all have personal convictions like that we're pretty hard-lined on. And I think the other thing that's important to remember is, as a human service worker, it's not really your job, and I don't mean this offensively because, you know, right, but it's not really our job to give advice or to make judgments about a person's question. In that kind of situation, what I might do is just say, well, here's all of your resources. What do you want to do? And asking the questions that help that person come to a realization about how they feel with their values and their judgments based on the options that they have. I think we focus a lot on our perspectives and what we feel about the questions that our clients have, but it's really not about us. It's about what the resources are. And as a skillful human service worker, it's about how can we bring that person to self-realization about the resources they have and which one's the best for them. So you don't always have to remove yourself from the situation. You just don't put yourself in that question.
Well, I think Alden wants the last word before our writing exercise and break.
I think that was beautifully said, and I think that much of our education has been dedicated to ethical dilemmas and to professional skill building and understanding how to navigate through our own limitations and our own sort of personal growth, like you were talking about, in terms of understanding how to best serve people, taking ourselves out of the situation, maybe to like having to step back and put our values aside in order to best help someone, or just straight actually physically stepping outside of the situation. And I think it's so key to realize too that it would be a luxury to be able to just hand our issues over to people all the time and be able to just say, there's probably someone way better at this organization that can help you. I as a client don't think I want to be shuffled around from person to person, and I think having that rapport and that trust in someone, even if they don't necessarily have all the skills to help, if they're asking the right questions and if they're there for the right reasons, that's who I want to help you with. And maybe there are agencies where there's a low case workload and we really can pass issues on like that, but in reality I think that's going to be really rare, and that we're going to have to work on our own skill building to work through situations like that, no matter our values.
Yep. Thank you. You got the final word. So now we're going to transition. Those of you, we've had 17 people participate in the discussion today, really exciting. And so now everybody in the class gets to participate. You're going to have a writing exercise where we would like for you to answer these 4 questions. We will use this primarily for purposes of evaluation for the class and just to kind of help us think about things. But we would like for you to put your names on it so we can get some performance activity from those of you who choose to engage in group. So as we looked at the questions that you provided, it appeared that there were some that Keri and I wanted to kind of play with a little. And so we're calling this the Keri and Dan show. And it's going to be a dialogue between the two of us, but obviously jump in. But when working with a client that has religious beliefs that we are not educated, what are good resources to use to gain information about that faith to better understand and serve the client? What do you think, Keri?
Well, when I first read this question, I thought about being in this position of creating this course and kind of how I went about learning about each faith and learning how to incorporate the different elements of each faith. And so first I went to people. I went to teachers, community leaders, those that had a reputation of being experts in that area. And I emailed, I pursued conversations, I sat in person with people. Simultaneous to that, I was researching online for other organizations that included mission statements, frequently asked questions, anything that I could glean like practical experience with. And there were a few books that I checked out from the library. So I try to be really resourceful, but my priority first was to speak with people.
So what's a good way to identify those people? Would you go online? Just check Christian churches, Hindu temples. How do you go by that?
Yeah.
About that?
I looked on like a online directory, just so like you could probably do it in the phone book as well, but to try and find the leaders. For the U of O, for professors, I searched the U of O website. So yeah, probably websites is how I got contact information.
So, you know, basically all this stuff is available. Your creativity and your curiosity obviously is what dictates it. I come by it quite a bit differently because I've been in this community for 36, 37 years and have participated in multiple events. And so what was interesting is when Keri and I put our kind of information together, we really came up with many of the same people. That what is now being called the usual suspects. You know, we did have a little bit of trouble trying to figure out, for example, Buddhism, but then we had Mark Uno, who, you know, really fit two different roles for the course. Likewise, Hinduism, and then, in fact, we really didn't have anybody up until probably the middle of September. And then all of a sudden we received a flyer from the University of Oregon President's Office saying, President LaRiviere is going to give a speech on Dharma and Karma at the local interfaith prayer breakfast. And we said, ding, we'll see if that works. And of course, we loved it, and he came to see us. So again, creativity, keep your eyes open, and just make sure that you're constantly seeking people and relationships, because really pluralism is all about that process, trying to identify people, get information, etc.
Can I ask you a question on that? Sure. I was sharing this with my wife about President LaRiviere. That's the French word. So is he just a Hindu scholar, or that also his faith?
I think it's more of his professional scholarship.
Oh, okay.
Because he doesn't describe himself as a Hindu scholar.
Okay.
He describes himself as a Sanskrit scholar, which is obviously an ancient language. So I think it's more, but I wouldn't want to be, you know, quoted on that. But I do think it's more of his professional, scholarly discipline. So how can we get involved in the interfaith community in other cities? Where would you go to find an interfaith activity in someplace other than Eugene? Who would you go to?
That's a really good question. When I read this, I thought, yeah, that'd be it's a good question to answer. I think I would go to the internet, and depending on which city I was trying to learn about or get involved with, I would type in interfaith activity, conference, meeting in that specific city, and just go from there. I personally haven't searched this out, but I would partner with you and search it out and hopefully find some resources.
I did check it out. I did check it out. Interfaith community, and I just randomly threw in, you know, like Portland, Oregon, Klamath Falls, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, Salem, Oregon, multiple entries. It's really one of the kind of alive and vital parts of the spiritual interfaith community now, and especially with this new emphasis on pluralism. So I think the best thing to do is, if you're going to go to a new community and you're interested in that kind of dialogue and that kind of orientation, just go to the, you know, to the town that you're living in and plug those things in. You will find multiple entries. So you'll actually even have a choice for interfaith dialogue. We learned about the importance of pluralism in this class and some ways that it is practiced in Eugene. What are some ways we can practice pluralism on campus in our community?
This is something I'm still exploring as well, because, and I think this class has helped me learn about some of the resources through the religious studies professors. It's not something I've pursued as much on the campus, as much as learning about who we could recruit to contribute to this class. But I'd be really interested in learning about any clubs or groups for different religions that have been established. I think the religious studies department would probably be a great resource to just go and ask if things exist like this on our campus.
We know we have multiple religiously based organizations on this campus, 12 to 15 or so of them. But what we haven't seen is the actual organization of pluralism as a focus. And so one of the things that could emerge from this course, of course, is that someone would say, why don't we put together a pluralism group, invite all the different individuals that are members of existing organizations, and then publicize it. And who knows, as a result of this course, we could get, you know, an interfaith pluralism type of group going, because again, I think judging from the reaction that we've had to this course, that this would be something that people would genuinely appreciate and enjoy. And it hasn't been done. We can do it now. It can be part of what any one of us could engage in as an opportunity.
I have a question for you as a director of the FHS program. Do you think this class will be required for FHS students, like a requirement?
No.
Why?
I'll tell you why. The FHS program is moving away from any new additional requirements.
Okay.
In fact, we may lessen the number of requirements and required classes that we have in our curriculum. What we're looking for is more diversity of classes that give students choices. If you look carefully at the history of the Family Human Services program, it used to be a very small program, very small faculty, and so we had a restricted number of people who could actually teach classes. As the program has grown and we've been able to add more faculty, each one of those faculty has classes they choose to want to teach. And so you'll see next quarter, for example, Kevin's teaching a course on writing. Art Pearl's teaching a course on civic engagement. Lauren Lindstrom's going to teach a class on poverty. You know, this class has been offered. So what we really, Spike is teaching a course in advanced diversity. So we're moving away from increased requirements toward more breadth, more options, and hopefully that's going to mean some smaller classes, more topical classes. I know I want to teach more classes that I'm, you know, that are very unique to my particular scholarship and my interests.
Yeah, my second question to that is, if that's the case, because teachers pretty want, I mean, anyone who is a UFO student will be in some point working involved with people. Do you want to, like, bring this class to attention for other majors so that it doesn't just include FHS students?
Yes, very much so. I think Keri and I both have been plotting and scheming with Wade and Andy on how to take what we've done this quarter and use it as the basis for a future class. And so I would like to have this class be something that would be appealing to FHS students, but also to students across campus. I don't want it to get too large, though.
Okay.
I want to keep it below 40 students, so we can get that kind of dialogue.
Okay.
And you know, get everybody that's you know, part in the class to, you know, to feel comfortable with participating.
Yeah, because I have a student asking who are not FHS, can we also apply for that class?
Yes.
Or just it's only for FHS students?
No, we actually have several people who are not FHS majors in this class.
Oh, okay.
Not many. We started with more than we have now, but what are some ways to continue educating ourselves about the various religions so we may better serve our clients? What are some things that you're doing that keeps that process moving for you?
I read.
You read? Okay.
Yeah, I do. And I think this question, it's going to be like whatever is meaningful to each of you. So if there are specific religions that you want to learn more about to then serve communities or organizations that tailor more to that religious demographic, then go for it. You know, if you're trying to become more aware of how to implement pluralism into an organization, you know, study that, see how that's been implemented. I would go towards gaining knowledge for what is relevant to you. So for me, I am looking at how human service programs throughout the country deal with this sort of topic or not deal with it, and seeing how our class here compares on any level to what else is being taught at other schools.
Real quickly, the final one. There are multiple courses on this campus that you can take. I mean, for example, there's a book in a class called the Bible as Literature in the English department. Jack Maddox teaches courses on religion and public policy in the South. The Religious Studies department teaches 15 classes every single quarter. So there are multiple opportunities for classes in English, in history, religious studies, and now we have one in the FHS program. So I think that's the opportunity that you would have available to you, and I would encourage you to take them. So, yes.
Can I give one quick shout out, because another opportunity is the interfaith service that happens 11th of every month, which is tomorrow, and it's phenomenal. And so after your hour-and-a-half service, then there's tea and cookies and a chance to meet everyone who's been discussing and performing and attending, and that's a really great way to start those conversations. So it's the First Christian Church, 12th and Oak at 7 o'clock every 11th of every month.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
I've gone, and it's you get a broad spectrum of people speaking. And the last time I went, they did a prayer service, and they shared all their different ways of praying. And they had a Native American family go up on stage and do a chant that we wouldn't hear. They were honoring us to be able to hear it. It was
Nice.
really powerful.
7 o'clock.
Thank you both for sharing. Now our final activity for the class. Oh, Jessica, do you have something?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask Keri if she had any specific books she recommended.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll put them on Blackboard. Yeah, and I'll give you all the info about that. That was mentioned earlier of also resources throughout the quarter that you guys had wanted information about. I'm trying to get all of that on Blackboard. So if you remember something specifically that was mentioned that you don't know the author or how to access it, ask me, because I probably know.
Access Keri. She's a great researcher. She's incredibly tenacious, patient, and does not leave a stone unturned. And so use her. Great asset. Our final activity is going to be a small group. We're trying to get a little bit of everything in this class. As I said, it was an ambitious agenda. We're planning to spend about a half hour. You get to select your own groups. And so for the first 15 minutes, these are the 3 choices that you have available to you. And there'll be opportunities, again, small group. Pick the ones you want.
If we were to compile a list of the top 3 to 5 things to remember when working with clients of a different faith, which would you choose and why?
The biggest thing that stood out to me in this class is I think the first week was when Mark talked about dropping the story.
Good.
That was very nice.
Who thinks that's one of the top 3? Okay.
Tara?
I guess I would say, and I'm trying to phrase this in one catchy little sentence, never feel like an expert, and don't let the media don't let the media form your opinion on what you know about a religion.
Good.
Use each person to help you keep learning.
I think it was Eric who said this, but knowing that if something isn't, like, if your religion is important to you, that matters, and that means that it's important to me too, and that matters to me. I think that was really important.
Try to, I agree with you because that's also my idea. Not let the media influence you about how you view other people because they happen to hold a religion different than yours. Don't stereotype people based on their religion.
I'm going to say something really basic, actually, kind of also Mark Uno, he really stuck with me. He said something, and I know you guys remember this, did the whole exercise of us just shutting up and just remaining quiet. And I think that was extremely powerful, at least for me. I'll speak for myself, because in this culture everything's so hurried and rushed and immediate. And he really kind of instilled that value again, I think, just within a class setting to say, think before you speak. It's okay, you know. And there was that silence when you guys put up that very first question, and I was loving it. It's the first thing that popped in my head. I'm like, damn straight, we're thinking, you know. It's a good question, and I was hesitant to raise my hand because I didn't want you guys to stop thinking, but I'm just always. But yeah, I think that's a really valuable lesson to just really, especially working with our clients, to just take a couple seconds sometimes if you don't know the answer to say, let me think about that.
To just always look for the strengths, like no matter what the faith is, even if it's being oppressive, there are strengths in every person and in every situation. You just may have to look harder in some of them. And that if you are working with a client that's an extremely different faith than you and it makes you uncomfortable, to use that skill of learning to look for the strengths in every person and situation to kind of help you navigate that relationship and rapport.
I was just gonna kind of like add an addendum to the media question, or the media part of it. For me, like the media focuses, or we kind of talked about this, media focuses on the extremes on both ends, and that's kind of where our perceptions of religions come from, I think, a lot of times, and I think that was just kind of what I wanted to add to it. Is that there's extremes on both ends, and you can make any religion look like what it's not really meant to be.
I think that just to realize that every person is its own world, and everybody is unique, and something will define that person, either it's religion, background, ethnicity. If that person is a human being, and that we're not perfect. Everybody's its own world. So treat everybody individually and not as a whole, but as one individual human being.
Someone already touched on never being the expert and always learning, and the client being the real expert. And I think that utilizing resources is something that can be really empowering, and not only utilizing those resources, but learning how to identify them, and kind of piggybacking on the conversation that we had during the Keri and Dan show about how do we continue being in action, and how do we really expand our knowledge, because I think as soon as we stop doing that, we're not doing our job.
I like that Keri and Dan show.
That should have been a photo.
Any other thoughts?
Anything else?
I'm going to read our list.
because we actually have 9. But maybe we. So we have drop the story, take a humble approach and filter the media. Each person's belief matters. Don't stereotype people based on their religion. Be slow to speak and quick to listen. Identify and magnify strengths. Pay attention to the middle ground. Multiple factors define a person. And utilize and identify resources. Pretty good list.
3 times 3 equals 9. And that's a magical number.
Next.
Pardon?
There's another slide.
Okay, we're done. Thank you.
I just want to thank you both, like a true thank you for holding such a phenomenally profound educational space for us to explore these conversations that are so important for people's lives and have traditionally been so triggering. You know, this has really been like revolutionary for me. So thank you both for taking time.
And good job.
Yeah. I would like to actually thank you, Dan and Keri, because the cohort 2011 did something really amazing, and this is one of the things that it defined the cohort. We did, things to teach others that yes, we can do it, and we can still have a conversation about it. And I thank you so much because as part of the cohort, you guys are awesome, and I love you all. And this is why I'm so proud to be part of the FHS, and because this type of conversation in classes. So thank you.
And I want to piggyback off of that too, Pedro, because I think it's important to recognize that not only are there 29 people in this class, but there are multiple people in each cohort that are also participating online. So it's much bigger than just the 29 pioneers or whoever. This has really affected a lot of people's lives and the lives of the people that we know outside of school even, because if you're anything like me, we talk about it constantly. So thank you.
I personally would like to thank Dan and Keri, and that's the way that if you give someone that is a program director, they can be scary sometimes. But he's making us comfortable, right? And making, supporting Keri idea and working with her and so forth. I really appreciate you. And sometimes also there's a question, you are so humble to say, I don't know about that. And you are a person who has a lot of experience. Many will say, I know, but I will get back to you.
Good technique. Thank you all.